Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We know that everyone has been Zooming a lot this week, maybe even more than usual, although I know a lot of us, we spend time on Zoom, but thank you for joining us. We are excited to continue our work on looking at data and equity strategies, and in particular here to explore and improve equity and impact in adult education. We have structured this workshop, as you all know, it's an hour and a half, and we've added some breakout groups, and we really are presenting this as a collaboration with you all. I would say mainly we'll be presenting some information, but we also are fully aware of the fact that you carry out this work on a daily basis and really are very close to it. So there are a lot of the pieces that some of the breakouts and the chats are really to draw on your experience and sharing, and we hope that we can have a lively conversation where it isn't you learning from us, but us learning from you, your colleagues learning from each other. That's the way we'd like to carry it out. In the spirit of that, we do have open access to your microphones as well as the chat feature. We have a lot of chats throughout for sharing strategies as well. So use those features and hopefully we'll have a lively conversation. Next slide, please. So a little bit about us, WestEd, as you know, we've been committed to issues of equity, education, and economic mobility, and we continue to refine our ideas and purpose and our leadership. We're moving to create a space where we can really focus on the interrelationship of education, student success, and economic mobility. And the economic mobility is also about well-being. We want healthy communities. We know that education isn't the answer, economic mobility isn't the answer, but wrapping it together along with well-being and the services that adult education provides offers an excellent opportunity to begin to support people along that pathway. Our team works in partnership with collaborators, stakeholders, education professionals to build solutions that will help to provide equitable access and success to career pathways that support economic stability and well-being. Next slide, please. So, and as you can see, many of you are familiar with our lines of work. We focus a lot on data tools and analysis to support education and pathway work. We're really focused on supporting and developing pathways that are intentional and linked to workforce needs and industry needs, as well as learner needs, also on implementing other pathways. We definitely focus on the labor market and economic analysis. And we like to engage, as I said up front, we like to engage with people on these conversations because we don't think alone our team provides a solution. It really has to be informed by multiple partners and stakeholders. Next slide, please. So today I will introduce ourselves really briefly. Randy Tillery is unable to join us today, but he's here in spirit and really continues to guide this work. My name is Blair Wilson-Toso, and I am a senior program manager at WestEd. I lead the K professional development and have worked on the adult education pipeline, as well as working on several national initiatives that include the integrated education and training, the IELCE, as well as other areas of adult education, particularly in adult basic education and career pathways. I'll pass it over to Jessica.
Thanks, Blair. My name is Jessica Keach. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm a senior research associate at WestEd in our post-secondary and workforce group. I manage the adult education pipeline dashboard. I also do a lot of professional development with Blair in adult education, supporting adult learner success. And then I'm also involved in several of other research and evaluation projects at WestEd. Prior to joining WestEd, I was in the IR or Institutional Research Office at a community college district in southern San Diego County and did a lot of work supporting our consortium down there. So I am excited to be here with all of you and learn from you, and hopefully you can learn some things from us today too. Go, Ayana?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ayana. I am a program coordinator too with WestEd, and I am new to the WestEd team and the adult education work. And so I am here supporting Blair and Jessica and here to learn from you all as well. And thank you, Dr. Farmer, for putting in the chat your name and where you're from. We invite everyone else in the audience to go ahead and do so as well. And I'll go over the agenda for today. So we're going to start with the welcome, and then we're going to get into some context setting, talking about who adult education is tasked to serve. And then we're going to talk about equity in adult education. So reflecting on the holistic learner journey, connecting it to your 3-year plan, and then also doing some small group discussions and a breakout. Then we're going to get into using data to identify equity gaps, talking about what data sources are available and what practices and strategies you can use. And then finally getting into stakeholder engagement to identify and communicate equity gaps. So our goals for today will be for you to reflect about what equity means to you in your work with adult learners, identify strategies and resources to help you center equity in your conversations, and to identify key stakeholders to engage in understanding and communicating equity gaps. And I'll pass it over to Blair.
Thank you. And so in thinking about equity, we always start with like, who do we serve, right? And we wanted to do a reset. So I went back and looked through some of the key documents that inform our work. And we have multiple tools that display data. There's the AEP dashboard, TOPS-PO reports, WIOA state reports, MIS reports. But as you take a moment, there's these definitions on the left-hand side that talk about who we serve or what is the intention of the work that we do, defined through key documents. And we like you to take a read through them and then put your ideas as you look at that, think about how it resonates to you, and particularly in our learners accurately captured and represented in these tools or documents, right? There's language like underserved adults, lifelong educational opportunities, moving on to courses and workforce, barriers in access, support services, labor market and employment. And so do you see your learners represented in there? Is that what you think about the work and who you serve? Okay, you all are testing my my TESOL, my ESL wait time. I started as an ESL teacher, and I've never been very good at the wait time. So I count in my head, but I'm just curious, like, do you all think, thank you, Leslie, for adding something in the chat. You're saving me. Right, teaching people 18 years and older, right? So what's the definition of an adult? And as we know in CAPE, it's 18 plus, and in WIOA, it's 16 plus. So those are the people who we think about serving. Who else has a definition? How would you refine the definitions of who we serve? Paige says yes, she thinks it captures it, but it's hard to know how we're reaching the underserved. Yep. Individuals get lost, and so do, and what we'll talk about is so do some particular groups. And you serve the most marginalized, right? They're the hardest to reach, right? That's very clear in the work that we do. We're not serving everyone. We're serving people who are in need, right? Working parents, disabilities. Yes, exactly. See, there's lots of groups in these generalized terms, sometimes smaller groups or groups that we don't necessarily think or come readily to our mind get. Yes, thank you. Undocumented legal human beings. I like that. Providing them access to economic opportunity. And Paige also says it's so hard to serve all these people when have waiting lists, which is another thing, right? There's a choice, there's an expansion of who can we serve, and funding always comes in there. Thank you. Let's go ahead and move to the next one. So, and then to further focus ourselves on equity and the adult learner, we also wanted to really highlight what we all already know. I know this slide is not new to any of us. There's been lots of discussions. We've seen the reality in our programs, but the adult learner enrollment was definitely affected by the pandemic. And while many programs are seeing enrollment increase again, there's still work to be done, right? Especially as the pandemic disproportionately affected people of color and low income populations. In other words, this is our population that really was affected by the pandemic economically through educational opportunities. And even in this, we're only seeing a fraction of the people, as couple of you already posted, of who could likely benefit from adult education services. So that sets the context. It's a big job, right? All of a sudden we're like overwhelmed. It's Friday. Let's go home and go to sleep. So I'm going to hand it over to Jessica, who will sort of walk us through some of the thinking around equity, and then some tools on how to use equity or to identify equity.
Thank you, Blair. Yes, and it can be very overwhelming, but I think, as all of you know, just start and take it piece by piece. So as we transition into our discussion around equity, please feel free to turn your cameras on, but also know that we encourage participation in whatever format is accessible to you. So whether that's through the chat or sharing your voice, regardless of whether or not you're in a space that allows you to share video. So the conversation that we're going to have will help us set the context for our discussion on data tools that I'll walk through later in the training. And hopefully we'll be able to find some commonality around why we're here, why we work in adult education, and our hopes for adult learners. I want to acknowledge that at times conversations around equity can be unfamiliar and uncomfortable, but because we've all opted in to be here today, I know that this group is ready to step outside of our comfort zones. And ultimately, the goal is really just to be able to learn from one another, like Blair mentioned earlier, and walk away with a better understanding of strategies and tools that can be used to facilitate conversations around data and equity outside of this space, so possibly in your consortiums at your own institutions. Next slide, please. Okay, so our mindset, I want to start by sharing our mindset as we engage in these discussions. And this is particularly as it relates to discussing data or observations in the field. As we reflect, I want us to remind ourselves to frame our thoughts and our inquiry around the systems and programs that exist to serve adult learners. It's going to be really important to remind ourselves not to attribute data to the intrinsic qualities of people or groups. So ultimately, we just want to stay away from making generalizations about the motivations of students and people. Is there anything that anyone would like to add before we jump into our discussion? Perhaps any tips that you've found helpful in talking about equity? And you can also feel free to just drop those in the chat if you have any resources you want to share with your colleagues. I cannot wait as long as Blair, so I'll share a tool that I found helpful. So one tool that I found helpful is the oops and the ouch technique. You all may be familiar with this already, but part of having conversations around equity is messing up, right? And this is inevitable, no matter how experienced you are, how well-versed you are in particular terms and processes. So if you say something that didn't come out as you expected, something that perhaps is hurtful, you can say, oops, to acknowledge it, and then try again, right? Alternatively, if someone says something that you find harmful, then you can say, ouch, and that lets the group know that there's something that really needs to be discussed further. I don't expect this to come up based on the structure of today's training, but this protocol is a great tool to have available. It's a great tool in your toolbox, and it might help you as you facilitate conversations on your campuses. So if you have any tips or tricks, feel free to put those in the chat as well. All right, next slide. So have any of you seen this graphic or something similar? Let me open up my chat box. You can give me a thumbs up if you've seen something like it. Okay, the giving tree. So let's see. Oh, thumbs up. So we've got a few people who've seen something. Got a yes. That's great. It's a very common graphic. Sometimes it will be used with a baseball field. Yep, someone said the one of the kids at the stadium. That's great. Does anyone want to share a little bit about what you see in this graphic or what any of these visualizations mean to you? Feel free to come off mute if you're interested in sharing.
Hi, my name is Patty Lopez. I am with West Valley College, and I've seen this used as an example of equity, right? Every student comes at a different level, and you can expect all the students, you know, to start at the same level. You really have to give them resources and help them so that, you know, they reach their full potential. If it has to be a taller ladder, you know, for one student than the other, then that's what we have to do. So it's really is about, you know, being able to provide, you know, the resources that are necessary to be able to support each learner in their needs. And so and that way be able to give them, you know, equity.
Great. Thank you so much, Patty. I think that was a great explanation. I see in the chat, someone said a rising tide does not lift all boats. Some people have holes in their boats or none at all. Exactly. Someone said, I like the justice addition as well. So that's great. I can do just a brief overview, but I think y'all have captured it really, really perfectly. So in this visualization, that I pulled from George Washington's online public health resources page, the tree represents and that's represented by the tree that bears fruit, right? And you can also see that the tree is curving to the left. And so while a tree may naturally curve to the left in nature, it's important for us to recognize that our systems are human-made, right? And our systems have often been a certain way for so long that while outcomes may appear unintentional, they're actually often deeply rooted in discriminatory practices and beliefs. So the second visualization attempts to solve the inequality through equal access to resources. Right. So, however, the person on the left, they didn't need a ladder to access the fruit. And the person on the right didn't get a ladder that was tall enough to help them reach the fruit. Right. So equity is that third visualization. It's represented where two folks are provided with specific ladders or resources that they need to reach the fruits of the apple tree. And while equity is a solution for addressing unequal systems, justice, which is that visualization on the right, or I've also seen that last graphic referred to as liberation, can take equity one step further by fixing the systems in ways that lead to long-term sustainable, equitable access. So that's the long game. You can see that the tree has permanently been adjusted so that each individual has equal access with the same ladder. So that's our hope, that's our vision, right? And great. It's great comments in the chat. I really appreciate it. Next slide. So in our work with the field, we've done collaborative brainstorming activities, held conversations like this to really uncover what equity means to you, practitioners and service providers in adult education. So what you see on the screen are responses from your colleagues to the question, what does equity mean in adult education? And so as I read off some of these responses, I'll ask that you tell your colleagues right now in the chat what equity means to you in adult education. Right, so one of your colleagues has previously said, equity in adult education means ensuring access to services and information in a variety of languages. Right? We've heard providing access, resources, support, referrals, and education to all who walk through our doors. Heard supporting learner leadership through educational opportunities that transfers to their other daily activities. I see in the chat access for all, right? Access is a very common theme throughout these responses and these quotes, right? So someone said access, making sure that we listen to community members who may benefit from adult education, but who are not yet accessing our services. Someone said no gatekeeping of minimum qualifications, and this was specifically related to career technical education, right? Someone else said all students have access to the outcomes that they want, with the support that they need based on individual circumstances. Right, okay, so I see in the chat, using the knowledge of our adult learners that our adult learners have alongside their curriculum, right? Access to the same treatment, opportunities, and advancement. That's great, thank you. Next slide, Ayana. Okay, so along with the previous slide and this discussion around what equity in adult education means to you all, we've engaged with the field to ask about what equitable outcomes are in adult education, right? What are those outcomes? And traditionally, we talk about the adult education student journey, starting with enrollment, then progress, transition, success, and employment and earnings. These are your CAPE outcomes. They are aligned with WIOA outcomes. They're familiar to you. However, in conversations with the field, we've heard so much more than just these standard metrics or this standard journey centered around these metrics, right? So what we've done is create a visual that aligns with a more comprehensive and holistic view of the adult learner journey. This is one that begins with access and enrollment, progress towards learners' own identified goals, attainment of their own identified goals, ultimately economic mobility. So this journey is wrapped in integrated supports, right? With a deep focus on well-being throughout every step of the journey. And finally, and almost most importantly, what we've heard is that it's centered in learner choice and agency, right? So that learners have the ability to identify their own goals and make those choices for themselves, and that access is there. So will you click one more time, Ayana? Here are some of the comments that have helped craft this journey. So let me zoom in a little, right? So along with access and enrollment, higher participation rates, your colleagues have said, increased enrollment, progress, right? Rates of persistence for English language learners. For goal attainment, one of your colleagues has said, seeing different populations of students from various backgrounds and ages achieving their identified goals. And then economic mobility. Students walk away with skills or credentials that lead to jobs that allow them to do more than just scraping by, or with a clear plan on how to get there. And then for integrated supports, folks have said commonly need for technology, computers, access to the internet, closing the digital divide, as well as resources like childcare. And then central is that learner choice and agency, and one of your colleagues has really captured it, getting to choose and be prepared for their next steps, right? Whether that's transitions to living wage employment or transition to further education. So let's go to the next slide. And I am going to just take a moment. This is the first time we've shared this model. And so I'd really love your feedback, right? What are your reactions? What resonates with you? Is there anything missing, or is there anything that should be changed? And you can feel free to put that in the chat, or you can come off mute. I'll try to pause a little longer than last time before moving forward. But is this resonating with you? And what should be updated? I see Uta put in the chat, I think learner choice and agency at the center is crucial. All right, Leslie is saying, I would add an arrow from mobility to access as lifelong self-improvement. That's great. Okay.
Yeah, just kind of building on what Burr put in there. And there was another comment about the importance of recruitment. I think to get to the point of access, there's a lot of work that goes into that piece. So I love this, but just to say that there's probably a lot that kind of precedes the access, and maybe there could be something added just to show that's a big step. And once folks get in there, then hopefully they're off to the races, but it's not always that simple.
Yeah, that's great. So there's something that comes even before access that we should be thinking about. That's great. The circle should maybe be open. Okay, that's great.
Leslie, could you say, sorry to interrupt, but I'd be curious, Leslie, could you say a little bit more about like what you mean and the intention between that?
Yeah.
Oh, just.
I told you we were gonna make you all work this
I
session.
know.
Yeah, and I have to leave in just a couple minutes, but I'll come back. Right, it's not a closed system, so more porous. So that feeling that you can kind of come in and come out, at different points
Mhm.
is part of it, but it feels like a very closed universe. So, so maybe you can just, kind of like make, the outside circle kind of like more gauzy.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Maybe like a glow or something, like one of
Yeah,
those.
well, like cells,
Yeah.
like even cells are porous. So,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. That's all.
Great. Thank you so much, Leslie.
Sure.
I see in here arrow for many of our students, arrows go both ways. That's great. Financial literacy, making more money is only a part of not scraping by. Yes. I think that we really wanted to focus on well-being here as well. It's not forwarded as much, but this idea that folks aren't working towards one day, being healthy, happy, secure, right? We want to address that along every point of a journey of the journey for adult learners. I like well-being and integrated sports. This is really great. This is helpful. So thank you so much. Please feel free to keep the comments coming as we move into the next slide, and we'll come back to this in a few slides. So I'll turn over to Blair.
Thank you. I'm not very good at multitasking. Jessica, could you post our email in the chat? Because even sometimes, you think
Yes.
about it a little bit, we really are thinking about this and how to sort of frame our work. So feel free to send on additional information. All right, so Jessica set the stage for thinking about equity sort of writ large, and we wanted to put this in the context of the work that you all do and your 3-year planning process, which we know took an inordinate amount of time and thought last year. And now you're in the process of implementing them, and you're beginning to think about refining, continuous improvement, and the data that informs that. So we're going to think about it in terms of equity. So in terms of equity, the 3-year plan focuses on equity in some way. So here's some of the language that we pulled from the 3-year planning process. It talks about it in needs, barriers that learners encounter, gaps in service, and identifying your priority adult populations. And then the guidance really gives you some space to prompt them. So like, how do student outcomes compare across different student populations and programs? And are particular demographic groups achieving outcomes at higher rates than others? And so we were wondering, like, how did that prompt you to think about your equity plan? Are there other questions that you all used or that we should be using? And what might be missing from this? All right. I'm gonna ask a question then. So for me, when I was thinking about this, I noticed we focus a lot on priority adult populations, but we don't talk about equity in terms of our staffing plan or who's engaged as stakeholders. So just thinking about, we tend to think about equity in a very singular way about delivering our services, and who, granted, students, they should be student-centered, but how are the other places? Where are the other areas that might then spill over and really begin to look at equity for our student population? Yes, classified components. Oh, everybody's on a roll. Thank you. What are support structures that facilitate the achievement of outcomes? Thank you. ESL students succeed more than ASE students. Yes, exactly. There are those outcomes or those structures that should also be informing equity in our 3-year plan. I know that's a little bit of a step aside, but I think it's an interesting piece to think about. All right, next slide, please. So we'd like to now turn it over to you all to think about how you have addressed equity in your 3-year plans. I think that that's a space where we begin to drill down and identify what might we want to do, how do we think about it, what data are we collecting. And so we're going to have you all have conversations among yourselves as the experts, right? You all are experts and colleagues in this work and can probably provide additional information and insights, right? I've read many of the 3-year plans, and it's interesting to see how different they are. And I don't mean that just geographically or what you're doing, but also in just how you can sort of see how people have thought about it and planned about it. So that we're hoping by having you go on and talk and discuss the following questions in breakout rooms, that you'll be able to think, prompt each other to think about it more broadly as well, or query each other about, oh, you thought about that, how was that working for you? And so in your breakout rooms, we're going to first have you identify a note taker. We just would like someone to record and be able to share out a couple of the highlights of your conversations, or something that made you say aha, or that was surprising. And then you amongst yourselves, we're not going to facilitate these, is just to discuss the questions that are on the board on the slide here. And you don't need to answer all of them. We do want you to take to be able to feel like you can share them. I've posted the questions in the chat, so please keep your chat open when you go into the rooms. You'll have 10 minutes to have this conversation. You should be in groups of about 5 or 6. And are there any questions before we move you into your breakout rooms? All right, then let's go ahead, and you'll have 10 minutes once you're in there.
It ended up working out to be about 4 to 5 people per room.
Perfect, perfect, thank you. If you haven't entered your breakout room, just go ahead. There should be an invite for you on your screen. Just go ahead and click join.
Blair, someone asked in the chat if we can share our PowerPoint. And so I didn't know, I know we will be, but I wasn't sure how that was going to be facilitated.
Oh, that's a good question. I forget when it's not, when it's the summit, it's a little bit different. So why don't we, Patricia, do you know, is there somewhere for us to upload our PowerPoint?
I thought there was a spot on the Cape Summit platform itself, but I'm not positive on how you go about doing that.
Okay.
But you could ask Veronica, Holly, or Mandalee. They would be able to tell you exactly how to do that.
I think I can find it. Okay, let's see.
Okay.
I just see our
We can get the registration list also and send it out to them.
yeah. Yeah, I'm not seeing a place to upload. But if we get the registration, then we can send it out. We could also save it as a PDF right now and just upload it to the chat. Let's see.
Oh, that's a great idea. Sorry, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're able to upload it or if it had to be Holly, Mandalee, or Veronica, like on the back end.
Oh, yeah. Okay, let's see.
Jill in room 1 is asking for help. Did one of you want to join that room?
Yeah, I can go in there, sure.
That's me. Since we have some people who haven't joined a room, there are a few rooms that only have like 2 or 3 people in them, just
Okay.
to let you know.
Okay. I'm just trying to. Okay, I think I've got our PowerPoint that I can.
You might need to reshare the PDF when everybody's back, just because I'm not sure if it's going to populate in the chat with everybody in breakout rooms.
Man, I never know.
I'm not sure either, which is why I'm just saying you might want to reshare it in a little while.
Yeah, I'll reshare it at the end too, just
Okay.
to make sure everyone has it. I always wonder, I'm like, are they getting my chats in their group breakout rooms? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not positive, so I just wanted to throw that out there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Should I broadcast that they have like 2 minutes left?
I was just gonna ask you, is there a, is there a timer or anything for them?
No timer. I jotted down the time when you guys said
Okay.
10 minutes and it was like 11:03.
Okay, yeah, just let them know like a few minutes left or however many.
Yeah, if there's a timer feature on break rooms, I don't know about it. I can go ahead and close the breakout rooms if you're ready for that. I think it gives them like 60 seconds to come join the room again.
Yeah, that would be great. Welcome back, everyone.
Thank you. We're going to take a few minutes just to hear a little bit of share out. It was I got to be in one of the breakout rooms. It was very, very interesting. And I will take a little bit of time. Room 1, does anybody want to, that was the room I was in. Does anyone want to share out, or I did take some notes?
The room I was in, I didn't remember the number of the room.
Number 1, Leticia.
Sure that Karen, I know I came in a little later, she said something powerful. She said that she wishes to change the perception of individuals. They have this perception that, and specifically people of color, the expectations that they have of people of color, or the lack of expectations, changing that stereotype. She was giving an example that there was a culinary pathway that most of the individuals that spoke another language were placed in this pathway with no other option. It reminded me, and I share that back, I'm a child from the 70s. And when you were in school, and my siblings, when they were in school, they were expected, they were tracked to be in a particular occupation because they were Latinos. Girls would go become secretaries and boys mechanics. So I love that she said she would like to see that individuals change their perceptions. I say change the stereotypes that many have, that we only fit into this certain category and we can do better. So I just wanted to share that.
Super, thanks. So yes, it was setting goals and outcomes based on student feedback, which was where the data came in, and then beginning to think about programming for adult learners and choice and voice. Room 2. Okay, I don't know who was in room 2. I'm going to go ahead and see if anybody would like to share out from their breakout room.
This is John. I'm sorry. I forget which room we were in, Blair. So maybe
All
Paige,
good.
she was in room 2. I'm sorry. I'll stop. Go ahead, Paige.
Go ahead, John, and then I'll go after you. How's that?
Oh boy. Now I don't know which room number I'm in, though. I probably just got us all out of sync. I'm sorry, guys. So we were talking about those 3-year plans and whether or not we explicitly, overtly stated equity type strategies or even use the word equity versus did we use equity as a lens in talking about or describing or designing other strategies that we know support equity at lots of levels. We were thinking about, we serve kind of 2 big client types. We serve students, and then we serve those that work at our schools as well. And so is it a lens that some of the strategies we have? An example would be, that Iris brought up from the Compton area is this notion of students come to us preloaded with lots of skills and competencies. And do we build systems that recognize that and honor that and provide student, I'm going to use the word credit very loosely, not meaning credit in a class or towards graduation or anything, but do we provide them the credit of having that prior knowledge in some way that it benefits them as they engage our pathways in our program, so that the program is doing something very critical, which is it's adapting itself to meet the student. We know the students are already adapting to meet us, but is the program, is what we do reflexive to meet that student where they're at?
Thank you. I appreciate that. The thread through from the room 1 is especially that look at students as people who come with a background knowledge and really need to be represented. We are just running a little behind, so I'm just saying that there are 9 rooms. I'm going to move to Paige because she volunteered, and then if people want to jot their highlights in the chat. And I want to say I really appreciate the thinking about the lens, John. And then do we actually use that language? Are we using it as a lens? And having I can answer that from having read those 3-year plans, but probably you all are already thinking along the same lines. So Paige.
Sure. So I was in group 5, and one of the consortia in our group, or the person talking, shared that they have just hired, or they're hiring an equity and trauma expert that will be leading 3 meetings with their members, and then the members will go back, do some homework at their sites, and then come back to meet. So those will begin in January. And this representative also said that they have a lot of experience. They've been working on this a lot, and they've had some disastrous consequences and fallout. So they're just continuing to persevere and persist in the work. So they have a plan to address it. And then another person in our group predicated his conversation with us by pointing out that adult ed is equity work. What we're doing is already equity work. his particular consortium, one of the things that they're planning to do, or that they've committed to do, is renew their commitment to applying the immigration integration framework, and increasing support and opportunities for immigrants. And in their consortium, over 50% of their population are immigrants in their student population. And then also one of the people talked about, how to measure the increase in equity and in their staff, and just that's a difficult thing to measure. And just a very cool thing from one of them, their school district hired these 2 staff members that are called JEDIs, standing for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And he's hoping to get them involved with adult ed also. So some good highlights from Group 5. Thank you.
Thank you. And I really appreciate you sharing that it isn't all about successes. I really appreciate that someone mentioned that they had disastrous and they had to rethink. I think that's true, and that there are pitfalls, even when Jessica talked about some of the conversations. So yes, I appreciate people sharing. So I think there's as much to be learned from the disasters and the repairs and the rethinking as there is about the successes. So it sounds like you all had a lively conversation. Really appreciate the chat that's going on, but I think we are going to move on. This is a really fruitful conversation, and to learn from one another is really fabulous. And yes, the piece of the adult education picks up where some students have been failed by the K-12 system. And Kelly, I like the way you frame that it was a system that failed them, and not that they failed that they failed out of the system, which is oftentimes how our work is represented in who we serve. So much appreciated for the conversation. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jessica, who's going to get us back into some data tools.
Thank you, Blair. All right, so we'll move into a discussion on using data to identify equity gaps. So we want to start with, where do you get your data? So heavy on the chat feature here today. Let us know in the chat, where do you commonly look at data on your adult learners? I've included some common sources on the slide, right? Including CASAS, TE. They have really great reporting tools available to you. The Launchboard, the adult education pipeline, has visualizations and your CAPE metrics. I've heard Literacy Pro, CalPro, Ellucian, which is the parent company of common student information systems that community colleges use, like Colleague and Banner. And then COMIS, we know our community colleges report their data into MIS, and then that data is also accessible in Datamart. So let's see. We've got a lot: TE, CAPE summary reports, Launchboard, CAPE fact sheets, WDB, MC, right? So labor market information, that's a great one. Let's go to the next slide. I'm going to try to catch us up a little bit. We're going to move into a peer learning activity. So it's breakout rooms again. And what I am going to ask you all to do is, in your group, everyone will have a slide and a topic, or actually 2 topics assigned to them in the Jamboard. So if Ayana or maybe Blair, if you'll drop the link to the Jamboard in the chat, that would be great. So what you're going to do in your groups is you're going to answer these 5 questions using sticky notes, conversation with one another. What measures are important to you in understanding outcomes in this area? So for example, one group might be assigned access and economic mobility, right? So what measures are important to you in understanding access, right? What populations do you or would you like to disaggregate by to understand equity gaps, right? So traditionally you think of race, ethnicity, gender, age, but as it's already been mentioned here, it's very clear we serve a lot of students with a lot of unique needs. You want to disaggregate by particular barrier types, right? ELL students, maybe students who were formerly incarcerated. And then we'll ask discuss what data sources do you or could you use to get data on those measures? What barriers exist to collecting or accessing that data? And then what strategies have you used or could you use to overcome those barriers? So we'll move into our breakout rooms now, and we originally had 15 minutes. Let's shorten that to just 10 minutes. So try to get at least one measure for each of your topics. And if you can get that completely done, move on to some additional thinking around measures that you might want to include. Are there any questions before we begin?
Did you want 5 breakout rooms?
Yeah, I think that'll work. Okay. Ready, set, join your breakout room. And we will ask you to share out a little bit when you come back. Here we go. Okay, let's see. What time is it? 11:27. So that's 10 minutes. Blair, do you think I should still do the demonstration?
I do. I think that we can, I do, or maybe
Okay.
just get a read on how many people are familiar with it. My guess is that it would be really beneficial to do the
It'll be helpful.
demonstration.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm chatty. I like to hear what people say and engage that way, so I can limit myself a little more.
No, I think it's going really well. We always just
I know.
so much.
Yeah. I mean, the last slides, like communicating about equity and 2-year planning, we've got some time
Okay.
in there that I think we'll be okay with.
Okay, that sounds good. Look at these Jamboards.
I made all 3 of you co-hosts because I didn't realize when I did breakout rooms before that you wouldn't be able to see who was in the breakout rooms. So now you should be able to see who's in the breakout rooms.
I think what happened with room 1 is that there were only 2 people who ended up in there, and one of them was not in adult. They weren't an adult education practitioner, so to speak. They were with the foundation. So they just felt like they didn't have that much enough perspective to add to the conversation. And then Leticia joined, and it was really, it took off between Leticia and Karine. So Karine, it was a cool conversation. I was glad to be a part of it.
So I wonder if I should join it. I love to join. Okay.
It looks like Steven just joined. Should I move him into a breakout room?
Yep.
I think so.
Or maybe not, maybe he left. I was just about to do it.
Hear
And then
that? He was like,
disappeared.
oh no.
Group 5 is moving. Okay, I'm gonna join a group and see.
Okay, which
it's
one are you
going.
joining? And then I will.
I think I'll join group 4.
Okay.
Okay. And then I'll be back. Where are you gonna go?
You know what? I think I'm gonna go to group 5 because it's one of the smaller ones as well. So
Okay.
okay. So do I just join that one?
Yeah, if you
so,
hit
yeah.
join, it should take you there.
Okay, perfect.
And-
Thank you.
What time, Patricia, are we done? I didn't look at I should have looked.
We started at 11:27, so you have about 7 minutes still. And
Okay.
I'll do a 2-minute warning again like I did last time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Patricia, do you know what time they're supposed to be coming back?
11:37.
Okay,
So I'll go ahead and close it at 11:37, which gives them like a minute to come back. So it'll really be like 11:38.
okay, thanks.
Mhm.
Welcome back, everyone. All right, so we're running short on time, but it's such great conversation. I'm going to ask if there's anyone who has anything to share that they found that came out of their breakout room that they thought was really interesting, or might be something that they wanted to share with the group around one of these topics.
Just two kind of interesting things, like not all data is created equally. You know, so you get bad data. And then the other thing is, like, we have a lot of data, and you know, the key is how you analyze it and what you do with it.
Yeah, I think that's really important, right? Like, what do you do with the information that we have available to us? In the group that I was in, there was discussion around a barrier being to data collection being the kind of translation or the translation of some of the standard categories into student-centered or plain language, right? And so I think folks in our group had some great strategies around that. And John shared a link. I'm going to ask John if you don't mind coming off mute and sharing that link that you shared with our small group.
Sure. Yeah. So the link I sent, this is a resource. I think SCOE built this out quite a while ago. They're the barrier definition cards translated into languages. Now, I didn't review them quick enough here to say that they take it down into student-centered plain language. That's, you know, students oftentimes won't tell you they have a barrier to employment. They don't, like, that's foreign language to them. Even if they speak English, right? But they may, you know, answer the question like, yeah, I don't have a job, you know, that type of translation. These cards don't do that, I don't think. They're just a straight language translation. And so there's a link in the chat to that. And that came from Scope. Now, I do know that, Jessica, the type of translation, in that plain day-to-day plain speak, like ask the student the question in this way. Don't ask them if they have a medical condition or I don't know, whatever the barrier might be. Ask them this type of question. They'll tell you yes or no, and then you can check the barrier. There are folks around the state that have done some really cool stuff with that. And there's a lot of best practices out there on how to do that. I just can't think of who they all are off the top. I almost want to say Poway Adults, one of them. We had Pam in our room, and I kind of feel like I remember something coming from them a while ago to that effect.
Great. Thanks, John. That's really helpful. Okay, we're going to move into our next slide. Let's see. I'm going to keep us moving. So here's some strategies. So you all talked a lot about strategies in your small groups. I've just included some strategies here around integrating data access and use. These are things I've seen in the field, and around centering equity in your conversation. So data access and use, data sharing agreements, MOUs between member agencies and workforce development boards can really help make sure you get access to real-time data and do some crossing of students and really understand your outcomes a little better. I've seen consortium integrate data work groups or committees into their consortium's governance model, right? So not something that is kind of an extra or thought about when planning comes around, but really an integration of a review of data and outcomes. Shared technology, things like Community Pro, that was actually mentioned in the breakout room that I was in, and then leveraging existing institutional committees and structures. At community colleges, there are a whole host of committees, institutional effectiveness committees, career education work groups, and student equity committees. And I think just like we've reiterated and heard here today, adult education is an equity framework. It is equity, right? And so ensuring that the adult education student and learner is centered in these conversations that are happening at a institutional level can really help to raise the profile of adult ed. And then centering equity. So training and preparedness of facilitators is really important. Mindset setting, we did that earlier. And feel free to take that language and use it freely, making sure that everyone is kind of on the same page in terms of what kinds of conversations you're going to enter into. And then disaggregation, what data means and what it doesn't. So really understanding that data is a kind of a guiding light, but you have to follow that light. I think someone might be off mute. So there we go, perfect. So disaggregation, what it means and what it doesn't, right? We can see data, but we really need to take it a step further and let that guide further investigation. And that comes in when you're highlighting the student voice, right? And the voice of your educators, the voices of folks really in your system. So surveys, interviews, really critical to understanding equity. And then practices. So there's a practice called a data equity walk. I'm going to give you an overview of that. And then there are visualization and data sources that are freely available to you, particularly around community data that I think can really help center conversations, spark new ideas, spark opportunities for outreach and conversation. So I'm going to walk you through a few of those tools as well. Next slide. Okay, so the data equity walk, this is a process that comes with a customizable toolkit, and it was developed by Education Trust West. So a full data equity walk is a 45 to 90-minute activity for any size audience, right, where folks engage with education data, other kinds of data, and discuss equity issues. So participants dive into that data that shows outcomes and exposes gaps between groups of students. You can see in the image to the right that this can be facilitated using large poster boards or sticky notes to reflect and record reactions to the data. We've also done this practice online using breakout rooms, right? So it can be adopted to a virtual setting. So one thing that's really critical here is that participants explore the data individually before collectively discussing implications and identifying solutions. So taking that time to reflect and process without hearing that group feedback first is a really critical part of this process. And what I love most about it is that it doesn't require prior experience with the data, and it can be geared towards all audiences. So I really encourage you to take a look at this website. You can view our past workshop recordings and to see how it's modeled. Next slide. Okay, so I talked a little bit about resources that are available to you. So here are links to a whole host of data sources, some of which you've mentioned already throughout our workshop, the CAPE fact sheets, the Adult Education Pipeline. The last two are what I'm going to focus on today. And I'm actually going to do a brief demonstration for accessing the Centers of Excellence for Labor Market Research, and then also the census data map feature. So if you will go to the next slide really quickly, Ayana. So we're going to start with the Centers of Excellence, and then if you will allow me to share screen, I'm going to walk us through this. All right. There we go. Okay, so this is the Centers of Excellence website. And as you can see, it's the leading source of labor market research for the California community colleges. But what's great about this is that the consortiums and all of your institutions exist within these boundaries as well, right? So everything produced here is meaningful to your work, especially as you consider the alignment and development of career pathways between adult education and credit community colleges and the workforce. So I'm going to show us an example. This is the homepage of the Centers of Excellence. So I'm going to try to find some research or some information on healthcare occupations in my region. So there's a lot of ways you can do that, but I'm going to do it by scrolling down. If I wanted to see all of the publications in my area, I could just click on my region, San Diego Imperial, but I'm going to use the publication search tool. So I'm going to select my region, San Diego Imperial, and I'm actually going to select a category. So these are different sectors. I'm going to select healthcare, and I'm going to search. There we go. And so what you see is the search results. They are redoing their website, so resources are moving, but here is a list of reports that have been done all in 2022 on a variety of different healthcare occupations, right? So there's a report on nursing assistants, EMTs and paramedics, one for community health workers, physical therapy assistants, radiologic technologists and technicians, occupational health and safety. I'm going to go ahead and click on one of these reports just to show you what it looks like. It's available to you. So psychiatric technicians. Let me make this a little bigger. So this is a report done by the Centers of Excellence in the San Diego Imperial region. It's specifically for San Diego County. And you can see at the top, it gives you some high level results, right, of the need for a program to train psychiatric technicians based on labor market demand, wage information, as well as existing service providers. So this is indicating there is a supply gap, right? This profession, which is listed further in the report, does train folks for occupations at or above the living wage, requires some college or certificate. The number of training institutions or number of institutions that provide training is low. The number of annual job openings is medium. And you can comb through this report. Here's the different occupations that are being considered, or the titles. It'll show you a lot of really great information, and you can use this to facilitate conversations in your consortium and between your institutions about pathways, career pathways that could really help transition students from lower wage to higher wage work. All right, let me go to our next example. And as I'm doing this, feel free to drop resources in the chat that you want to share with your colleagues as well. So the next one is the census data map features. So a lot of you are very familiar with census data, but I think something that is little known is that there is a mapping component feature of this data that's freely available to the public. Fair warning, this tool is a little clunky and sometimes frustrating, but I think the end result is worth it. So I'm going to do just a live demonstration. You can go back and review this recording. And then in the slides, I have some screenshots as well. So here's the homepage. I'm going to explore some census data. What I want to look for is educational attainment data. I happen to know that this is the file that I want to look at. Here's some of this data that you are often familiar with, probably familiar with, educational attainment. I really want to look at the population of folks who are 18 to 24 with less than a high school education. And so here's your data table. But I'm interested actually in folks in my area, right? So I'm going to click on geography. You can do a whole host of different geography levels, but I'm going to show you census tract, right? So this really gets down to a deeper level of granularity when you're looking at targeting services in your communities. So I've selected California. I'm going to go down to San Diego County. And I'm going to add all census tracts in San Diego County. And I'm going to drop off the United States. So I'm going to close this back up and I'm going to click on my mapping feature. Here we go, right to San Diego. So what's being populated right now is just the first metric in that metric table. So it's looking at total students. This is estimate of, not students, I'm sorry, total folks ages 18 to 24. But what I want to look at is the percent of 18 to 24-year-olds with less than a high school education. And so I'm going to find my variable, if I can. Here we go. So the percent of folks 18 to 24 with less than a high school education. It's going to update for me. There we go. So the darker the area, the higher concentration of, it's not concentration because it's not counts, but the higher percentage of folks that have less than a high school education. And there's also other things that you can do with this map. You can change the colors. I'll go with pink. And then I also like to change it to a detailed base map. So when you scroll in or zoom in, you're actually able to see pockets of your communities where you might be interested in targeting your services. And you all know your communities better than anyone. When you scroll in, you can often see with the detailed base map, you can see different assets in the community, right? So I know that this group here, this neighborhood grouping, there's Hilltop Park, right? Well, I'm from around here. I know that there's also an elementary school right there. How can we create these partnerships in our communities to support outreach program and engaging folks in our programming that may have otherwise not been engaged? Last thing I want to show you, you can click on a particular census tract and actually take you right to a profile of that community. So we've identified an area of need, of opportunity. And now for this particular census tract, I'm able to see there's about 7,500 people living in this area. I can look at the employment rate, all kinds of information. I can scroll down right here, language spoken at home, right? About 70% of folks in this particular census tract speak a language other than English at home. That compares to about 36% in San Diego County. So this is just a way you can use freely accessible tools to help improve your programming. And I really encourage you to take a look at it. Let me stop sharing we've really run ourselves out of time here, but Ayana, if you want to pop up the slideshow. Okay, so just skip through these slides. This is what I've just walked through. You'll have the PDF. And so I've put some screenshots here to help you navigate it. And then I'm going to turn it over to Blair. I know we only have about 5 minutes left, but I'll turn it over to you, Blair.
Thank you. Yeah, we can move on through really very briefly. We were talking about stakeholder engagement, which fortunately I think is an area that all of you work really well on. And we just wanted to think about who do you engage for conversations in equity? And Jessica identified some of them. There are more here. And then stakeholder engagement, we wanted to know who else would be on the list. We hope that you'll have an opportunity to have these discussions, but one of the clear ones that's missing here is the student voice. That's been brought up over and over again. They are our stakeholders. And next slide. And then we would have talked a little bit further about collaborative planning and also picked your brains about what you all do, but there's this list of ways that you can engage people in your stakeholders and talk about collaborative planning. Next slide, please. As well as providing, again, some more resources. The first is the equity walk, and then there's some ground rules for having those conversations. The others are the second two are really ways to think about adult education, and the college completion looks like it may not be appropriate here. It's a fascinating read, not because it's about college, but because it really brings to light many of the conversations and issues and language that we might want to take a look at. And the impact feasibility is really where you begin to ground those in action. Next slide, please. And then who are you communicating about with equity? I know we communicate, you all do reporting, and how are you doing it? Who else should be on this list? When you're talking about specifically equity, where do you go beyond your funders or beyond your consortium members? Is it interesting to your students to be able to communicate that? Your legislators? Those are the places I know on the board who you're talking to, and it would be interesting. It would have been interesting to have more conversation. Believe it or not, we were thinking we didn't have enough to fill this hour and a half. So now it's obviously should have been 2-hour session. Jessica posted the PDF in the to the slides in the chat. So those are there and available to you all. And next slide, please. And we really want you to take this conversation. We had hoped to have a time to have an open discussion about taking some of this information back and beginning to have you all think about not just the present, but as you move forward, right? Your annual planning is going to be coming up. How are you going to think about that? How are you going to think about data, new conversations, changes to your 3-year plans that you're identifying and refining, and then also evaluating. Yes, thank you, John. Ayana, would you flip forward to the, yeah, you see, no questions, no time for questions for anyone. We know how to get out of that one. But John, thank you for bringing that up. We are doing upcoming regional trainings. The one on equity on this topic here will be in the spring. They are 4 hours, they're actually 5 hours with a lunch, but 4 hours where we really dig into these conversations and walk through some more of these tools, apply them in an equity walk and planning conversations. But the ones that are listed on screen right now are the ones that are coming up, and there'll be a gateway to college and living wage employment, which we'll be doing a little bit of an overview, again, really fast, because that's only an hour coming up at 1 o'clock. So if you're interested in finding out a little bit more, they'll provide all sorts of tools for that. And these are the regions on the left and the dates. We're still scheduling one, but we're very excited. We've had a great reception. Shout out to all of those of you who are on, who have offered to host one of our trainings. I cannot tell you how much we appreciate it. If you have questions on this, you can email me. Ayana is really the master organizer of this endeavor. So that brings us to 11:59, probably 30 seconds to go. And we appreciate your patience, and sorry about the run through on the other. I, for one, am really grateful for those upfront conversations and the sharing that took place. Any last thoughts?
Blair, I have a quick question.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I know that you just posted the schedule for the regional thingies. The super technical term. Are those posted on the CAPE website?
They are not as of yet. They will be.
Okay.
We've advertised them on the Cape actually, I don't know about the Cape website. I will check in with Scoey Tap on that.
Okay.
They will be advertised in the see, now I'm really getting ahead of myself. The Cape newsletter.
Okay.
And that's where you'll be registering for them. We will also be sending out targeted email to each region with just their regional information. So
Perfect.
it's been a little bit of a fast move to be able to get them scheduled on such short notice. So they are coming up, Stephanie. And if you
Right.
don't hear about them, reach out. Please
Okay.
do.
I'm going to block it off my calendar now.
All right, that's perfect. Or send me an email and we'll make sure you get the information. And that goes to everybody. If you want a direct email, send us your email and we will make sure you get it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that pretty much wraps us up. Thank you, everybody. I did put evaluation links in the chat for this session and for the overall summit evaluation as well. And we'd greatly appreciate if you would take the time to fill out both of those.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
And thanks, Patricia. You're a great host. GoTap does a beautiful job running this summit. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks, everybody.